questions I have that I'd love to hear an answer from you would be around carbon sequestration. My question is really about real value to farmers. You know, we're basically inundated with people calling and reaching out to us about carbon sequestration, and it's hard for us, as individual farms, to sort out the true and real value of these kind of programs.
Yeah, I would. You could fit my knowledge of carbon sequestration in a pretty small bucket, Cherilyn. Yeah. But really, what I do know that's in front of us in the impact of the discussion around carbon is we're getting additional costs layered onto our production systems. That's the only certainty we know. We don't have clarity, and I'm absolutely in no way, shape, or form smart enough to understand the impact of carbon on the long-term climate, and so that's way above my pay grade and intellect. But what I do know is that Canada seems to be trying to lead the pack on behavior adjustments, and when we're an export commodity business, putting costs onto Canadian producers that are not on our friends and competitors in other nations is not without its challenges. And the two really key ones that I care about, because the math dictates that I care about it, is rail freight transportation, the impact of the carbon tax on the rail systems. Everyone talks about natural gas and drying systems, but that's really just a red herring. That is not a significant cost in the industry, and I challenge anyone who says it is. But the impact of the producer, the fertilizer manufacturers, the impact of carbon tax on their cost structure is significant, and they are not price takers. They pass their costs on, and so you and David are going to feel the impact of that carbon tax via those two angles. And that's what I worry about, that we're taking those costs on faster than our competitors in other nations.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Dean. Freight's always been one of our biggest expenses. And I think when I have conversations with the public about carbon tax, I think they've done a great job, the public, of trying to sort through what carbon tax really means for them as a consumer. And the conversations have been easier for me to explain to them what those expenditures look like for me as a farmer. And freight, I would suggest, is that it's going to be the number one impact, not just on the things that I grow, but the things that I buy. And that's what you touched on with fertilizer production.
Yeah, absolutely. And those, to a lesser extent, the machinery costs, but also impacted. But the freight and fertilizer are the big worrisome concerns of mine.
So you mentioned behavior adjustments. And I would be the last one to suggest that agriculture has a halo over our head or that we're a perfect industry. But also, where it makes sense for us to adjust our behavior when it comes to benefiting the environment, I feel like we've always done that. Every generation of farmer before me has looked at environmental sustainability as the way to continue farming. We just try to make the best decisions we can today that will help us tomorrow, that will help the kids who may succession plan for the next year. So are there any behavior adjustments that farmers are missing, that we're not understanding, that we're not appreciating, that we could do, or we could do a better job to adjust our behavior when it comes to the environment, or when it comes to, specifically to the carbon tax?
Well, maybe not in regard to the carbon tax, but as far as management of things that affect the environment, I'm still a staunch believer, and a long way from an agronomist. But I used to work with on our own farm a number of good agronomy teams, and I still believe we underutilize variable rate and to try to really dial in our fertility needs. And I think there's we have an opportunity to improve the environmental impact while substantially reducing costs and not putting fertility where fertility is not utilized. And so I would argue that sectional control, both on air drills and on sprayers, and variable rate would probably be the two things that the current government and I would see pretty eye to eye on, Cherilyn, and that doesn't occur all the time. As a staunch fiscal conservative, the current government and I have not always been on agreeable terms because of the fiscal management. But I think those two, from an environmental impact, I could get behind, and I'd like to see that adoption happen faster in the industry.
Yeah, but I like your comments. I would argue, I like the comments about variable rate, but I would argue that there might be just as many opportunities where we're not putting enough fertilizer on. I think when most people talk about variable rate, they think about where can I scale back on the fertilizer so that it doesn't cost me money. And I would argue that there's just as many opportunities for us where we should be applying more fertilizer in the right spaces. So I never like to leave the impression with people that the goal is less fertilizer. You know,
No.
I honestly think that the goal might actually be more fertilizer, but I agree with you that the placement of it is crucial.
And you're right. I'm not preaching that at all. You're bang on. You articulated it better than I did, Cherilyn. And in no uncertain terms, it's just that then when putting fertilizer more on the other areas, it's not wasted. It's fully utilized by the plants and the resources. Yeah.
And I'm just so challenged right now by the conversations around fertilizer reduction. You know, the government has a really strong narrative around emissions reduction. You know, that's one piece of the puzzle is in general reducing emissions. But I struggle really hard with their conversation around a 30% fertilizer reduction, because I don't in any way, shape, or form think that that's going to help us meet any of the goals. And that's the opposite of the goals we should be setting.
Yeah, I'd like to, if I were in charge of policy, and then very rarely does that occur, I would focus on wasted nutrients, not absolute in total nutrient use.
Are farmers coming to you? Are farmers coming to MNP for expertise on what it means to buy and sell carbon? I think one of the conversations we have as a wheat grower board is the government is telling us we need to do better at reducing our emissions, but industry and the public is coming to us to buy carbon credits. So we're being told we're so good at what we do, we have carbon to sell. And on the other hand, we're so terrible at what we do that we have to adopt new practices. Have you got those same comments from other clients?
Yeah, there's been lots of talk in the industry and lots of discussions with my friends and colleagues in the industry around carbon credits and carbon trading. But we are a long way from having a well-designed framework to be able to have those mechanisms be effective. And I don't know the capitalist in me is not entirely sure that actually is an effective model to, if reduction of carbon is your goal and objective, I'm not sure that's a productive model. But the policymakers, certainly at a regional level in Western Canada, it's not clearly laid out and articulated. And nationally and North American industry-wide, there's no semblance of overall framework built on the system. And so I don't see that happening, especially in the current turmoil. I don't see it happening in the foreseeable future. I don't get any confidence that that it's driving or changing behavior, and the he said, she said on the science front is a long way from uniformly agreed on and protocols. And so to me, I personally put it in the Dean doesn't care about that bucket and is not going to spend any of my life's energy and resources worrying about it. I just want to make sure that I would focus on its impact to the main costs inside of our business. That's where all my carbon energy would go, to say you're putting costs on my rail system and my fertility plans that is far in excess of my competitors and friends in other grain producing nations.
Yeah, I agree with Dean. I think I would never tell another farmer that they shouldn't try to squeeze a little bit, a little higher margin if they can. So if somebody else tells me that selling carbon credits right now means a lot to their farm business and they're going to put some time into it, then I'm not going to tell them they shouldn't do that, no matter what the dollar amount looks like. But if I'm going to spend time and energy thinking about carbon trading, I'm going to take all of that time and energy and put it towards policies that make more sense. And that is right now opposing the carbon tax, because I know without a shadow of a doubt that taxing farmers is not going to improve our behavior. It only makes us look at tinier and tinier pieces of the puzzle to try and make a margin somewhere else.